The story begins with Professor Edward Serfens teaching a class at the Rigarden Magic Academy in the town of Herbs Rigarden. He explains to his students that by pouring small amounts of magic into a special ore, they can produce sulfur, which serves as an excellent catalyst for fire. Curious to see this in action, Professor Serfens asks if anyone can demonstrate the process. He specifically calls on Will Serfort to perform the task. However, Will appears to be lost in a daydream and doesn't respond. The professor has to call his name several times to get his attention. Once Will finally snaps out of his reverie, the professor reiterates the instructions and invites him to come to the front of the class to demonstrate. Will reluctantly approaches the front and stares blankly at the materials laid out for the experiment. Professor Serfens, noticing his hesitation, asks why he isn't doing anything, reminding him that he simply needs to use the catalyst to manipulate the flame. The professor remarks that this should be a straightforward task. Will attempts to summon the fourth flame using his wand, but he fails, eliciting laughter from the entire class. Annoyed, Edward instructs the class to quiet down. He expresses his disbelief that a student from their prestigious academy is unable to perform such a basic spell. He criticizes Will, suggesting that he is merely a learner who excels in theory but lacks practical abilities. At this moment, a cheeky student named Kshin Ulster uses his fire magic from his desk to complete the experiment effortlessly. Edward reprimands Kshin for acting on his own and tells him to refrain from doing so. Kshin apologizes to the professor, though with a smirk on his face, claiming that he only wanted to help Will since he appeared to be struggling. The professor extinguishes the fire created by Kshin and addresses the class. He emphasizes that in their world, magic is paramount, and mages are considered heroes. At this academy, magical talent is the most valued attribute, and those unable to use magic have no place there, regardless of their theoretical knowledge. He concludes by stating that those who cling to unattainable dreams should leave the academy at once. After the class ends, we see Will standing outside the classroom. Kshin, accompanied by two of his cronies, approaches Will and taunts him, mentioning that he heard Will had gone to the dungeon again and questioning if he isn't embarrassed to gain credits by defeating weak monsters. Before Kshin can continue, a girl named Colette intervenes and tells Kshin to stop bothering Will. Xian wonders why an honor student like Colette is standing up for someone like Will. Colette responds that Will is kinder than Xian and works harder than anyone else. She implores Xian to stop humiliating Will, but Xian dismisses her, stating that kindness and hard work alone won't make anyone a great mage or help achieve an impossible dream like becoming a Maja Vander. Xian then leaves, saying he doesn't want to waste more time on a talentless individual like Will, echoing Professor Edward's suggestion that Will should leave the academy. Afterward, Colette walks with Will and tells him not to let those idiots get to him. She also criticizes Professor Edward, but Will insists they aren't wrong since he can't use magic. He remarks that he's lucky to have a cute girl like her worrying about him, which embarrasses Colette. She wonders how he can say such things so calmly. Colette tells him that flattery won't get him anything from her and advises him not to speak to other girls like that. Will apologizes, confused by her anger, explaining that he was taught to praise girls when he was little. He assures her there's nothing wrong with it since she is genuinely cute. Colette, flustered, tells him to stop talking. Colette then reminds herself to stay composed, as she is the daughter of a noble household. Noticing Will looking at the sky, she comments on its beauty. They observe a giant tower in front of them, where the world's 5 greatest wizards, the Maja Vanders, reside. Will notes that the Maja Vanders are up there, holding up the sky for them today as well. The story then explains that long ago, the people of this world were trapped in darkness and unaware of the sky. They lived in fear of the celestial host until 5 wizards emerged to stand against them. These wizards worked together to drive back the invaders and sealed the sky, bringing peace to their world. These 5 became known as the Maja Vanders, a title passed down through the ages, inspiring every mage to dream of attaining it. Colette asks Will if the hallowed Ice Maiden Albis Vina is watching over them today. Will agrees, reminiscing about his past with Alfrea Albis, known as the Ice Maiden. Alfrea, his childhood friend, had told him about the sun and moon in the real sky, and that they could see a beautiful sunset that turns everything bright red. She said it was the prettiest sight in the world and promised that if they became Maja Vanders, they could go to the top of the tower and see it together. Will recalls that it was a promise made between kids, but Alfrea truly became the youngest Maja Vander in history and reached the top of the tower. Despite lacking talent himself, Will remains a dreamer who can't give up on that promise and still wants to stand beside her. The scene then cuts to Professor Werkner reprimanding Will, who tries to calm him down. Werkner is exasperated that Will ventured into the dungeon again, especially going as far as the 7th floor. He warns Will that at this rate, he's going to get himself killed one day. Will apologizes and asks if he managed to earn the credits. Werkner gives him a stern look, but confirms that Will defeated an evil guard, awarding him 2 credit points. Will is elated to hear this, along with his cat, Kiki. Werkner then asks if Will is still dreaming of becoming a Maja Vander. Will wonders if that's so bad, and Werkner explains that to become a Maja Vander, he must first advance to the Upper Institute. This requires a substantial number of credits in spell work, writing, and praxis. Since Will can't use magic, he'll never earn spellwork credits. Will responds that this is why he's trying to accumulate as many praxis credits as possible. Werkner, however, tells him that it's practically impossible to advance solely on praxis credits, especially for someone who can't use magic. He doubts whether Will can even graduate from the academy. He points out that Will doesn't have enough credits to pass his next exam, and will need 4 more credits by the end of the week. Will realizes that he only has 2 days to earn those credits, and begins looking through his notes to find a monster worth 4 credits. Werkner offers a hint, mentioning that a Baskerville has recently appeared on the 6th floor, and no one has taken it down yet. Grateful for the information, Will hugs Werkner. Meanwhile, Sion, who has been eavesdropping, plans to hunt the Baskerville himself to get rid of Will from the school. The scene then transitions to Will on the 6th floor of the dungeon at night. He believes he can earn the 4 points easily, as he has fought a Baskerville before. Kiki, his cat, isn't too happy about this, recalling that she got burned by the Baskerville's breath attack last time. Will reassures her that they'll be more careful this time and asks Kiki to help him locate the monster using her nose. Afterward, we see Sion and his lackeys in the dungeon. They are confident that this time, they will get Will expelled from the academy. Without enough credits, Will have no choice but to leave. One of Sion's lackeys questions whether it's wise to explore the dungeon with only 3 people. Sion, irritated by this doubt, glares at him. His lackeys quickly switch to false praises to stay on his good side. Determined, the trio moves forward, with Sion thinking that those without talent have no place at their academy. Sion attempts to cast a locate spell to find the Baskerville, but before he can, another monster ambushes them, sending one of his flunkies flying and injuring him severely. The other flunky screams in terror. Hearing the scream, Will rushes toward the sound and sees Sion struggling against an evil sentinel, a monster worth 10 credits. Will is shocked, knowing that sentinels usually reside on lower floors. Sion's fire spells are ineffective against the sentinel, and he is clearly panicking. Will realizes the monster is too strong for Sion. He hesitates, contemplating whether he should help Sion, who has always ridiculed him. He remembers Alfrea's words, calling him the kindest and bravest person she knows. Despite feeling pathetic, he decides to act and blocks the sentinel's attack just as it is about to strike Sion. Meanwhile, Professor Edward arrives at Professor Werkner's office to inform him that Sion and his lackeys have entered the dungeon without permission. He asks Werkner to send his familiar to locate them. Werkner inquires about their location and, upon learning they went to the 6th floor, states there is no need to worry. He uses the crystal on Kiki's head as a relay to see what's happening in the dungeon through a larger crystal. Back in the dungeon, Will fights the Sentinel. Despite landing several blows with little effect, he finally manages to slice off the monster's finger. The Sentinel retaliates, but Will dodges and parries its attacks with incredible speed, confusing the monster. He stabs the Sentinel, making Xian question if this is really the Will he knows. Edward is also surprised, and Werkner explains that Will is an outlier. He possesses superhuman strength, greater than that of a mage, and the resilience of a dwarf. His observational skills allow him to memorize attack patterns after seeing them just once. Though he can't use magic, Will is the only warrior in this world of magic. Will predicts the monster's next move, cuts off its hand, and disarms it of its sword. When the Sentinel fires a beam at him, he slices through both the beam and the monster with a single strike. He then extends a hand to help Xian up, but Xian, frustrated and angry at Will's strength, refuses. Back at the academy, Edward is puzzled by how someone without magic can surpass magic itself. He leaves Werkner's office, deep in thought. The next morning, Werkner is once again angry at Will. Frustrated but acknowledging his achievement, he awards Will 10 points for slaying the monster.